Okay, thumbs up, everybody. Welcome to a cold, dark Wednesday night in Florida. It's dark everywhere. It's not as cold. It's not cold everywhere. But, 3 weeks to go in the study through David. So we're going to have to move a little faster tonight to get through what I want to get through tonight. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to have some kind of a warm-up exercise to get us thinking in the right direction. This is a version of I Can Name That Tune. You got to name the Bible character, and I'm only going to give you one clue. Now, I warn you up front, some of these, all of these, you're going to get them all, but some are easier than others. Born red all over like a hairy garment. Esau, nicely done, of course. Standing head and shoulders above everyone else. King Saul. Weak eyes. Nice, Leah. One of my favorite stories. Famously short. Wee little man. See how smart you are? Strange diet. John the Baptist. Nice. Yeah, there's some other people you could probably add to some of these, but
That depends on your perspective. Daniel's diet.
Daniel's wasn't strange. Yeah, Bruce says he's right. We're all on the Daniel diet now. Impetuous Peter. I don't know that I've ever heard anybody else described as being impetuous other than Peter in the Bible. A fool. Lots of fools in the Bible, but Nabal. Nice. Nabal. See how much you've learned? How much you already knew? Tent peg driver. Somebody knew it. Is that Matt? Jael, yeah. I guess everybody in ancient times was a tent peg driver, but Jael, I think, was the most famous tent peg driver. Yeah, not a lot of women driving tent pegs through people's skulls. You're right. This one you might not know. You'll know it. Wild chariot driver. Nice, nicely done. Jehu drove his chariot like a madman. That's what Scripture says. Very nice. Seamstress. Dorcas, Tabitha. Nice. Old, of course. Hair. Yes, it could have been several people. It could have been Samson, but for tonight's purposes, my wife knew it. It is Absalom. We are going to talk tonight about the story of Absalom's rebellion. And I don't know if you think that Absalom should have been known for his hair or not, but in just a minute you're going to agree this guy had a head of hair. 2 Samuel 14 is where we are. The text says this: no one in Israel was as handsome as Absalom. I started this class by saying there's not a whole lot of people in Scripture that is referred to as the women who are beautiful. Even fewer men who are described as handsome. Almost half of them are in the story of David. Absalom. No one in Israel was as handsome as Absalom. From head to toe, he was the perfect specimen of a man. Whew. I know. He cut his hair only once a year, and then only because it was too heavy to carry around. When he weighed it out, it came to 5 pounds. Think about that for a minute. 5 pounds of hair. He had 3 sons and 1 daughter. His daughter's name was Tamar, and she was very beautiful. Absalom cut his hair once a year because it was too heavy. 5 pounds. I looked this up. Average hair growth in a year, 2 to 4 ounces of hair. That's what most average people, their hair will weigh 2 to 4 ounces in a year. I'm probably on the lower end of that scale. Absalom, that's 80 ounces. 5 pounds of hair, can you imagine? And he was the most handsome man in all of Israel. There's an old country song that went, she don't know she's beautiful, never crossed her mind. Every time I hear that song, used to hear that song, I think, that is such a lie. Trust me. Beautiful women know they're beautiful. Handsome men know they're handsome. And they're treated differently, by the way. Apparently 5 pounds of hair made Absalom stand out in a good way. I don't know. That seems almost creepy to me. But you notice I highlighted it there. Notice what Absalom named his daughter? Tamar. Yeah, interesting. I want to remind you of David's family tree. I hope you can see that. Oh, man, I was sure it was good. Really, all I want you to see is here on that middle side. This doesn't show up on the TV screen. Those are the wives of David. You can't read them, but there's 8 of them that are named. And there are other wives and concubines. Down here, this bottom lighter pink square is a list of all of his children by those different wives. 22 children listed there on that family tree. The only reason I'm showing you all that is I want you to think about the drama in David's house with all those women who were wives, all those children who had David as a father. I want you to think about the drama that had to go on in David's house. Add to that David's parenting style. It was a dysfunctional house in a lot of ways. Quick recap to get us caught up to speed. That's a long-haired, handsome man, by the way. I literally Googled long-haired, handsome man, and that's what came up, which I think that's creepy too. So, but a quick recap. We talked a couple weeks ago about Amnon's, David's oldest son, his sin against Tamar. Tamar and Absalom have the same mother and father. They're full brothers and sisters. David is angry about Amnon raping his half-sister Tamar, but David doesn't do a thing about it. Absalom feels abandoned by his father, and he says, if Dad's too gutless to do anything about it, I'll take matters into my own hand. And Absalom kills Amnon, has him killed. David mourns the whole thing. In fact, he mourns Absalom's rebellion, but again, he doesn't do anything to reconcile. It's Joab that finally gets David convinced to, okay, you need to invite Absalom back to the city here. David does that with a caveat, but he can't see my face. Meaning I don't want to see his face either. And so there's this estrangement. Emotional distance becomes political opportunity. You know this story already well enough to know that Absalom is going to turn on his dad. If you were Absalom, I know we're moving kind of fast, but that's okay. We'll slow down when we need to. If you were Absalom's therapist, I want you to think about all the layers that would have been on his trauma egg to kind of deal with. He grew up encircled by his father's bickering, jealous wives. Were they really bickering and jealous? Oh, yeah. Absolutely. If Scripture doesn't say it, I'll challenge you to put 10 wives together and tell me if there's no bickering or jealousy going on. That is a recipe. And by the way, we do know that a lot of his wives had an issue with each other. Add into that mix a whole lot of half-siblings that David's my dad too. And it's a recipe for disaster. Grew up with a largely absentee father. He discovers Dad, King David, that everybody looks up to, is actually an adulterer and a murderer. He discovers his sister's been raped by a half-brother and his father does nothing. He is the son of a powerful king, which adds its own blessings and challenges. He is the most handsome man in Israel, which adds some notoriety and I'm sure some challenges. If you were Absalom's therapist, think about the kind of issues that you might have to help this young guy work through. So let's jump into his story. Winning hearts and undermining leadership. Chapter 15. After this, Absalom bought a chariot and horses, and he hired 50 footmen to run ahead of him. He got up early every morning and went out to the gate of the city. When people brought a case to the king for judgment, Absalom would ask where they were from, and they would tell him their tribe. Then Absalom would say, "You've got a really strong case here. It's too bad the king doesn't have anyone to hear it. I wish I were the judge. Then people could bring their problems to me, and I would give them justice." And when people tried to bow down before him, Absalom wouldn't let them. Instead, he took them by the hand and embraced them. So in this way, Absalom stole the hearts of all the people of Israel. Absalom is smart. Absalom is charming. He is highly motivated. Being the son of a king isn't going to be good enough for Absalom. He has big plans. So here are his tactics. He creates a royal image, chariots, horses, 50 men going before him. He positions himself as an approachable leader. He criticizes David's administration. He offers himself as the solution to the problems. He steals the heart of the people rather than take the throne by force. Do those tactics sound familiar in our political atmosphere today? You know, people have been doing that for thousands of years. Politicians have been doing that for thousands of years. Here's why you need to pay attention to me, because I'm better than the last guy. I'm better than what you got. Who's the most popular athlete on a struggling football team? It's the backup quarterback, you know, because I'm better than who's in there. Why is it easier to win hearts with charm rather than with character? Character is not always a popular thing, okay? And maybe that's the answer. Jeannie?
People like their ears tickled.
People like their ears tickled. Selfishness. Yeah. Dave?
I was going to say that charm is usually focused on making the person feel good.
Okay, yeah. Charm is focused on making the other person feel good. Renee?
You can never change character because character is determined by what you do. And so when you make a mistake, it goes to your character, and that's hard to correct when people know about it.
Okay.
You will be remembered for your worst day.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absalom's smart, and he certainly has an agenda. He certainly has a reason for everything he's doing, and he's not doing this in a couple weeks. Okay, he's playing the long game here. There's a couple years are going by here. Matt, did you have your hand up? I'm sorry. Why do you think a son like Absalom, who seemed to have it all, would conspire against a father who's king like David, a man after God's own heart? I mean, I get it if it was just this crumb. You know, we talked a lot about Saul. Saul had issues. Well, yeah, you know, if I was Saul's son, I'd have an issue too. Jonathan, this great son of Saul, he stands by his dad and fights. Dies, you know, with his dad. Now you got Absalom, who has like David for a father. You know, as close to God as anyone. Why do you think someone like that would conspire against his dad? Nicole.
You mentioned the household full of bickering wives. If he's a mama's boy at all, he's listening to those bickers and
Okay.
taking sides.
Okay.
And the ones that feel slighted by him, by David, they're going to make it known.
Okay. Jim and then Renee.
Well, being within the family of David, he can see him up close and personal and know all of his faults.
Okay.
And sometimes that will give some people like Absalom to think, well, I'm better. I should be, the ruler.
Okay. Over to Renee.
Anybody that's taught school knows when a child is raised in chaos, they come to school crazy. And you would have parents that come in looking all holy and sanctified, and they don't know the things that their children have told the teacher. Am I right, Fadia? And you just look at them and you want to strangle them when they come in looking all dignified and proper. And they tell, all kids need is just a sane adult. And so Absalom was raised in constant chaos and bickering and fighting. And people don't, I wish every parent could spend time in a classroom with children, because you see it in the children. And then the parents come to parents' night looking all phony. And you really have to pray not to tell them off when they come through the door, because their kids have come by after school and cried on your shoulder, and just, it's a mess. Yeah. And so I tell parents all the time, be careful what you say and do in front of your children, because they won't say anything, but you're breaking their hearts and you're ruining their character for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. Over to Dave.
I guess I got a question. Does David know at this time that Solomon is going to succeed him? Because if it's sort of known that David is leaning towards Solomon, Absalom's in a, David's getting older. Somebody's got to replace him.
I'm not sure he does, because Bathsheba really pushes Solomon. I think it's God's plan for sure. God's already said Solomon's going to build the temple, but Bathsheba is really promoting Solomon as the next
So
in
even in that climate, there are all these kids. David is not going to live forever. Somebody's got to take his place, and so I think Absalom goes, well, I'm going to try to get the inside lane.
Yeah. And I don't know the answer, by the way, but I think you've all made a pretty good case that what is going on in the house had everything to do with this son, who seemed to have it all, really turning on his dad. I don't know any other way to put it. I put on here 2 Samuel 14 to back up a little bit. If you remember when Absalom is removed from David, he says, I wanted you to ask the king why he brought me back from Geshur if he didn't intend to see me. David, it says, Absalom can come home, but I don't want to see him. I might as well have stayed there. Let me see the king. If he finds me guilty of anything, then let him execute me. Absalom is, even before this, is saying, I deserve an audience with my father. In fact, it is so important to me to have an audience with my father that I'll risk death. But David never does that. If you remember, Absalom sets the royal fields on fire in order to get an audience with his dad. Let's jump back in here, back into the story. Verse 7 of chapter 15. After 4 years, Absalom said to the king, he's putting his plan in play here. Let me go to Hebron to offer a sacrifice to the Lord in fulfillment of a vow I made to him. For while I was at Geshur, I promised a sacrifice to him in Hebron if he would bring me back to Jerusalem. All right, the king told him, go and fulfill your vow. So Absalom went to Hebron. But while he was there, he sent secret messengers to every part of Israel to stir up a rebellion against the king. As soon as you hear the trumpets, his message read, you will know that Absalom has been crowned king in Hebron. He took 200 men from Jerusalem with him as guests, but they knew nothing of his intentions. While he was offering the sacrifices, he sent for Ahithophel. I highlighted that name because he's going to be a player here in just a minute. One of David's counselors who lived in Gila. Soon many others also joined Absalom, and the conspiracy gained momentum. After 4 years of unrest, unhappiness, frustration, planning, dreaming, scheming, Absalom decides it's time for me to take the throne from David, my dad. That guy, Ahithophel, I don't know how you pronounce it, but that's how I'm pronouncing it, wasn't just one of David's counselors. Ahithophel is actually the grandfather of Bathsheba, the father of Eliam, who Eliam was one of David's mighty men. So this is a guy who has a reason not to be great friends with David. David seduced took advantage of, I think, his granddaughter Bathsheba, had her husband killed, and yet he's an elder statesman. He's a counselor to David. In fact, his advice is so highly regarded that it is said that, in fact, Scripture is going to tell us that people thought it was the words of God. That's how highly regarded this guy was. Fast forward just a little bit in our story. David gets word that all of Israel is joining in this conspiracy against him. And he's going to have to flee for his life. In fact, he gets some intel back that I'm going to have to flee for my life. His entire household flees from Jerusalem, but he leaves behind 10 concubines to kind of take care of the palace while he's gone. His troops leave with him, including 600 Gittites. 600 warriors. The Gittites follow him out of town as well. On their way out, there's a strange encounter with a little man named Shammai. Actually, I don't know if he's little or not. He seems like he should be. Chapter 16, verse 5. This is almost parenthetical, but it speaks so loudly, I think, of where David's head and heart is in the moment, as well as kind of where his heart stays. As David and his party passed Barium, a man came out of the village cursing them. It was Shammai, son of Gera, a member of Saul's family. He threw stones at the king and the king's officers and all the mighty warriors who surrounded them. Again, there are hundreds of mighty warriors. There's a guy throwing stones. "Get out of here, you murderer, you scoundrel," he shouted at David. "The Lord is paying you back for murdering Saul and his family. You stole his throne, and now the Lord has given it to your son Absalom. At last you will taste some of your own medicine, you murderer." Okay, Shammai is a Benjaminite. He is a relative of the king, the previous king Saul. And he is throwing stones, literally and figuratively. "You murderer, you scoundrel, the Lord is in this, the Lord is behind Absalom." If nothing else, this is an example of the lingering resentment that is still kind of held against David by a lot of people. There's still people who see David as stealing the throne from the house of Saul, obviously. Verse 9. It's one of my favorite verses. I keep telling you, okay, Abishai's an amazing guy. Here's another reason why. "Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king?" Abishai, son of Zeruiah, demanded. "Let me go over and cut off his head." David, just let me go up there and cut off his head. Come on. This guy's driving us all crazy. Can I just go cut off his head? "No," the king said. "What am I going to do with you, sons of Zeruiah?" We should have had a count on how many times David says, "What am I to do with you, sons of Zeruiah?" "If the Lord has told him to curse me, who am I to stop him?" Then David said to Abishai and the other officers, "My own son's trying to kill me. Shouldn't this relative of Saul have even more reason to do so? Leave him alone. Let him curse, for the Lord has told him to do it." I don't think the Lord told him to do it. Verse 12, "And perhaps the Lord will see that I am being wronged and will bless me because of these curses." So David and his men continued on, and Shammai kept pace with them on a nearby hillside, cursing as he went and throwing stones at David and tossing dust in the air. Strange guy. Strange story. As David and his men continue up on the hillside, this guy keeps continuing with them. He keeps throwing stones. He keeps cursing David, throwing rocks at these hundreds of soldiers. I love that David says, "Perhaps the Lord will see that I'm being wronged and will bless me because of these curses." How much different things would be if we all said, I'm going to let God figure this out. When someone's throwing rocks at me, when someone's throwing curses at me, what's my natural first knee-jerk reaction? Throw them back. Yeah, go cut off his head. Is that what somebody said? Yeah, send Abishai. Yeah, do it. Nicole.
Almost as if he's tongue-in-cheek here. At least that's how I interpret it. He's like, God told him to, leave him alone. Whatever. He's just kind of humoring
Yeah, maybe.
him.
Yeah. Back to Mike.
I mean, this is so different. Earlier, we read of David going to God and asking, why does it say David went to God and said, should I leave Jerusalem or should I
Yeah.
stand and fight? So I don't know. I think David's maybe, everything's catching up to him. He's
Yeah.
just feeling guilty. He's just tired or whatever. And there's maybe, I don't know, no fight left in him or something?
Yeah,
'Cause
well,
he's
we-
taken down many men for less than this.
Yeah, absolutely. And we didn't read it, but the text says that when he leaves Jerusalem, he has his head covered. He's barefoot. He is mourning. He's weeping as he's leaving. He walks up the Mount of Olives where people worshiped. And, he's kind of fleeing Jerusalem, but he's broken. Yeah.
So maybe the word is sardonic, sort of a fatalistic kind of.
Yeah. But he doesn't take revenge or maybe justice out on this guy Shammai. By the way, does anyone know what happened to Shammai eventually? Little rock thrower. Anybody remember?
Yeah.
What happened to him?
On his deathbed, David told Solomon, don't forget what he did.
Yeah.
And Solomon took care of him
Yeah.
after David died.
Yeah. When David returns to Jerusalem, actually one of the first people that meets him is Shammai begging forgiveness. And again, just let's kill him, okay? No, I'm gonna, and David forgives him. But on his deathbed, David tells Solomon, punish Shammai. And Solomon actually tells Shammai, you cannot leave the city. Shammai does, and David puts him to death. Solomon does. I'm sorry. Solomon puts him to death. Yeah. So, who are you listening to? There's a part of this story we're going to get to right now where people start whispering into Absalom's ear and also whispering into David's ear. Chapter 15 says, when someone told David that his advisor Ahithophel was now backing Absalom, David prayed, O Lord, let Ahithophel give Absalom foolish advice. It doesn't sound like the kind of prayer we usually hear David praying. It doesn't sound like the Psalms that we read that David wrote. But David's prayer is, let this guy who was a trusted counselor of mine, let him give Absalom foolish advice. By the way, Ahithophel is going to give Absalom a lot of advice. Some of it's good, some of it is not good. There's also a man named Hushai who is going to give advice as well. Chronicles says, Ahithophel was the king's counselor, Hushai the Archite was the king's friend. Hushai is a close, trusted friend of David. He works as a double agent in this whole thing. David tells Hushai, you go with Absalom. Keep your ears open. I want you to come back and I want you to pretend like you're joining Absalom, but I want you to be a spy for me. And Hushai does that. So Hushai is a double agent in this whole thing. Chapter 16, verse 20. Then Absalom turned to Ahithophel and asked him, what should I do next? Ahithophel told him, go and sleep with your father's concubines, for he has left them here to keep the house. Then all Israel will know that you have insulted him beyond hope of reconciliation, and they will give you their support. So they set up a tent on the palace roof where everyone could see it, and Absalom went into the tent to sleep with his father's concubines. Absalom followed Ahithophel's advice, just as David had done, for every word Ahithophel spoke seemed as wise as though it had come directly from the mouth of God. So Ahithophel's advice is, you take your father's concubines on the roof where everyone can see, and you degrade them and yourself. Absalom wants to humiliate his father, and this is the most in-your-face kind of thing that he could possibly have done to humiliate his father. I think this is coming from a place of bitterness and anger. hurt, pain, a dark heart, to be sure. It's bad, it's sinful, it's wrong, and it's just, I think it flows from a twisted, broken heart. This says, I think this says a lot about where Absalom's heart is, as much as who he's listening to. Who are we listening to? This guy whose words spoke seemed as wise as though it came directly from the mouth of God. Well, that didn't sound like it came from the mouth of God to me. It's people whose counsel we trust. I've got to ask myself, is it really godly? Do I see God's hand in difficult situations, or just the people involved? Okay. Ahithophel is going to give Absalom some more advice. This time it's going to be strategically good advice, but God had other plans. Now Ahithophel urged Absalom, "Let me choose 12,000 men to start out after David tonight. I'll catch up to him while he's weary and discouraged. He and his troops will panic, and everyone will run away. Then I will kill only the king. And I will bring all the people back to you as a bride returns to her husband. After all, it is only this man's life that you seek. Then all the people will remain unharmed and peaceful." This plan seemed good to Absalom and all the other leaders of Israel. Ahithophel's advice is, let me take everybody right now, and we'll find David and we'll kill him, and that's all we'll kill. But then Absalom said, bring in Hushai the Archite, who was actually working for David. Let's see what he thinks about this. When Hushai arrived, Absalom told him what Ahithophel had said. Then he asked, what's your opinion? Should we follow Ahithophel's advice? If not, speak up. Well, Hushai replied, this time I think Ahithophel has made a mistake. You know your father and his men. They are mighty warriors. Right now they're probably as enraged as a mother bear who has been robbed of her cubs. And remember, your father is an experienced soldier. He won't be spending the night among the troops. He's probably already hidden in some pit or cave. And when he comes out and attacks and a few of your men fall, there will be panic among the troops, and everyone will start shouting that your men are being slaughtered. Then even the bravest of them, though they have the heart of a lion, will be paralyzed with fear, for all Israel knows what a mighty man your father is and how courageous his warriors are. I suggest that you mobilize the entire army of Israel, bringing them from as far away as Dan and Beersheba. That way you will have an army as numerous as the sand on the seashore. And I think you should personally lead the troops. When we find David, we can descend on him like the dew that falls to the ground, so that not one of his men is left alive. And if David has escaped into some city, you will have the entire army of Israel there at your command. Then we can take ropes and drag the walls of the city into the nearest valley until every stone is torn down. And verse 14 says, Then Absalom and all the leaders of Israel said, Hushai's advice is better than Ahithophel's. And then we're told, for the Lord had arranged to defeat the counsel of Ahithophel, which really was the better plan, so that he could bring disaster upon Absalom. Through this whole episode of Absalom rebelling against David, I don't know why he never stops, Absalom, I don't know why he never stops to consider, God's always sort of told Dad what to do. And God's always been involved in these battles when it comes to David. He never seems to take into account that he's not just against David in David's army, that God, is part of this thing. Yeah, Tyler.
Well, typically, when someone is in the thought process that leads them to doing what Absalom is doing in the first place, they're usually not thinking about God when it's probably usually like the last thing on their mind when, they're in that sort of mindset. Especially with how far Absalom had gotten at that point, how deep in he was.
Yeah, I think when he takes the concubines up on top of the palace roof, it's a pretty good indication he's not thinking about God.
And even we sometimes tend to,
Yeah,
not necessarily when I say this, I don't necessarily mean that we do bad stuff all the time, but we even sometimes, a lot of the time, we aren't necessarily thinking directly about God doing stuff. I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way. It's just not always on our minds. So how much more when you're actually
Yeah.
doing stuff like what he's
Yeah.
doing?
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm probably not thinking about God when I'm making a sandwich sometimes, just as an example.
So Hushai does what David sent him to do. Gets the intel. He sends word back to David, hey, the entire army is going to be attacking. Does anybody know what happens to Ahithophel? This is really going to be impressive. This is like Final Jeopardy. Dave.
He winds up being discouraged and hangs himself.
He winds up being discouraged, going home and hanging himself. It's not a competition, but you win. Ahithophel goes home and hangs himself. So the battle lines are drawn. The forces of Absalom are marching against the forces of David. But again, David has good intel. God's paying attention. God's involved. So David's ready. David wants to go with his men into battle. And they say, no, you can't come with us into battle. You're worth 10,000 soldiers. You need to stay here behind. So David splits up his army into three. Okira's here. I don't know if they're regiments or platoons. Danny would know, but three big groups. Three big military groups. Abishai, Joab, and a guy by the name of Attai are going to head up these three big groups. All the troops, 18 verse, what do I have up there? Okay, let me back up a verse there. And the king gave this command to Joab, Abishai, and Attai. For my sake, deal gently with young Absalom. And all the troops heard the king give this order to his commanders. As these forces are going out to face Absalom, on the way out, David says, for my sake, deal gently with young Absalom. During the battle, we all know what happens. Absalom came unexpectedly upon some of David's men. He tried to escape on his mule, but as he rode beneath the thick branches of a great oak, his head got caught. His mule kept going and left him dangling in the air. One of David's men saw what had happened and told Joab, I saw Absalom dangling in a tree. What? Joab demanded. You saw him there and didn't kill him? I would have rewarded you with 10 pieces of silver and a hero's belt. I wouldn't do it for 1,000 pieces of silver, the man replied. We all heard the king say to you and Abishai and Attai, for my sake, please don't harm young Absalom. And if I had betrayed the king by killing his son, and the king would have certainly found out who did it, you yourself would be the first to abandon me. He says, hey, you'd throw me under the bus when David asks who killed Absalom. Enough of this nonsense, Joab said. Then he took 3 daggers and plunged them into Absalom's heart as he dangled from the oak still alive. 10 of Joab's young armor-bearers then surrounded Absalom and killed him. Then Joab blew the trumpet, and his men returned from chasing the army of Israel. They threw Absalom's body into a deep pit in the forest and piled a great heap of stones over it, and the army of Israel fled to their homes. 2 different messengers run back to tell David what has happened in the battle, that the rebellion has been thwarted. David's first question to both of these messengers is, what about the young man Absalom? Is he all right? The first messenger knew he was dead, but knew that Absalom was dead, but he was afraid to tell David. Second messenger said, yeah, Absalom's dead. 2 Samuel 18:33. The king was overcome with emotion. He went up to his room over the gateway and burst into tears. And as he went, he cried, oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, if I could have died instead of you. Oh, Absalom, my son, my son. I think this is one of the most heartbreaking stories in all of Scripture for a couple reasons. If you pay really close attention to the text here, there's one word that David never uses until the very end when he's talking about Absalom. If you're paying close enough attention, he never says son. He never calls Absalom his son. Not when Tamar is raped, not when Absalom avenged Tamar, not when Absalom is in exile, not when Absalom is returning, not when he's living there day after day after day, in proximity to David, not when David fled, not when David came back to Jerusalem, even when the battle is beginning. David speaking to his generals, he says, "Be gentle with the young man Absalom." Not be gentle with my son. Be gentle with the young man Absalom. When he gets the message back that the battle is over, his first question is not, how did it go? His first question isn't, tell me the details. The very first question is, how is the young man Absalom? Is he still all right? And it's almost as if he can't bring himself to say, how's my son? How's my boy? Messenger, thinking that he's bringing David good news, says the rebel is dead. And now it seems like finally this clarity comes in David's life, and all the stubbornness, all the pride, all the hardness kind of is shattered by the reality of what's happened. And we're told that David is devastated. He goes up to his room and he just loses it. He weeps. He's devastated. And I've got to think in that moment, he's a dad. I got to think in that moment he's thinking about this, this little life that was born, this young man that was entrusted to him. Now that's what we dads do, right? We think about, back when our kids were smaller. And I got to think that David remembered Absalom as a cute little boy, a pretty precocious young guy playing soldier, playing David and Goliath, because that was a pretty famous story, in those parts. Because I want to be like Dad. I want to be the hero. Cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon. He grows up just like Dad, doesn't he? And I got to think that David's trying to process all that. And it gets to where then it's almost like when he finds out that his time is over, he's missed his chance to be the kind of dad that he was, then he says, "Oh, my son, Absalom. My son, my son." Finally, I kind of died instead of you. "Oh, Absalom, my son, my son." It's almost as if he can't stop saying my son, like it's been pent up in him almost. This was my son. This is a really heartbreaking story of regret, I think. We talk about David lived this amazing life. And I would love to spend a day with David. I would not want to live his life. He had some of the highest highs and some of the deepest lows that you can imagine. And I think this is about as low as David is ever going to get, is mourning his son, who tried to kill him, by the way. I mean, Absalom was trying to overthrow the throne. And yet we see David mourning his son. John Greenleaf Whittier, "Of all sad words of tongue and pen, the saddest are these, it might have been." So, we're in this class on such a high note, right? Everybody's feeling good to get through the rest of the week. About out of time, but any final thoughts? We made it through Absalom's rebellion. Yeah, Mike.
I was just gonna say, I think we still, sell history short a little bit if we. I don't think when you're born into a family of power like this, and much like probably even today, when it's very rare that there's the family relations that we are used to that happen just by proximity. You're talking about father that's never there, being raised by people, even I think it's more likely that was more culture of everybody expected, some of the sons are going to try to kill each other to take the throne, because that's what all the rich people do, or the royalty or whatever. So I think it's a whole different mindset than the villager family, that the family has to work together to survive. They almost have to work against each other to survive. So I'm not sure that he was exposed to some of those warm, fuzzy things that that we are used to, second nature.
Thousands of years, later, not a whole lot has changed, in human nature. And we keep, from the very beginning of this thing, we've talked about the fact that David's wives were a problem. God seemed to allow it, but it was never God's plan for a guy to have 10 or 12 wives. And David kind of reaps the tragedy of that. Jim, and then
Two quick thoughts. One, Dave, with all the things that David did wrong, and even not being a good father in a lot of cases, he still trusted God for deliverance, and that was a difference. Absalom, we get no hint of that. That Absalom followed what seemed right and listened to the advice of men instead of going to the counsel of God. And I've already forgotten the other point.
up here to G.D.
I was just thinking,
Wait for the mic to get there.
I was thinking of all the times I've read in the Bible where Saul was trying to attack David, and he would not touch the anointed of the Lord. But Absalom had none of that in him.
Yeah.
I don't know how he didn't remember it, didn't hear the stories. I don't know what happened to that boy, but he's a mess. I listened to him, and they talk about his outward beauty, and I'm thinking, oh, he is detestable in his character, an ugly man to me.
Back here to Dave.
I was just thinking that the Messiah is still 1,000 years away. And these times are closer to the Judges and closer to the Exodus by a lot. And so the nation of Israel has still got an awful lot to learn and to go through. And I think some of the actions and the decisions that we see of folks are a function of the fact that it wasn't that long ago in Judges we read about everybody did what was right in their own eyes. That's still there, very strong at this time.
Yeah, David's just the second king. Yeah. Over to Daryl.
I'm still kind of stuck on the fact that to me it was a sad story, because when the son loses respect for his dad, and his dad doesn't even want to talk to him at some point, he has to try to make an appointment to see his father. He does all these things, to me, are trying to get attention, and they're just not connecting with each other. And ultimately he ends up dying, and now all of a sudden he wants to cry about his, being his son, and he should have been trying to mend that relationship. And it's tough, it's very tough when you have a son like that doesn't listen or do, he's just imitating his dad, which is all bad stuff that they were doing.
Nicole, then we'll wrap up.
Sorry, I should raise my hand when you were. I think that David had to make Absalom an example to the other children. Don't do this to me. I think it was maybe a term of endearment when he kept referring to him as the young man Absalom, because he said it almost every time he referred to him. He didn't expect him to die, so when it was over, then he could release his true feelings and his true, regrets toward him, where he couldn't do that while he was still being attacked by him.
Yeah, maybe. David is such a complicated, fascinating man, because we read stories like this, but then you read some of his Psalms, and wow, that is a man after the heart of God. And then you look at, and I think we'll get there before this month is over and this class is over, you look at the advice he gives Solomon, and it is so right on. It is such great advice that David gives Solomon. It's on a spiritual plane, and it is repeated over and over again. And he shows these, he exhibits these characteristics of a great dad who is pointing his son in the right direction. So there's, it's, I guess just like all of us dads, sometimes we get it just right and sometimes we're way off. But David, again, really was a man after God's own heart. And he does keep coming back to that, even in his messes that he makes and his mistakes that he makes. So, yeah. Chris, last thought.
Well, you talk about how he was different with Solomon than he was with Absalom. I'm a father, and I had children that I really could identify with and I could talk to, and they would listen. And I had some that just did not, and I couldn't figure
And
it
you
out.
only have one wife.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I can identify with
Yeah.
the fact that some children you just can't seem to connect with because I wasn't equipped. I'm a lot better equipped now than I was when they were kids because they didn't come with a manual.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to be careful with each other. And I go through a significant amount of grief looking back and wishing I would have known better how to relate to my children in different circumstances. And I've had to apologize for many a thing that I didn't even know I was doing wrong at the time. Now I look back and I'm like, yeah, that wasn't good. But I think that may be part of why David was a man after God's own heart. He made mistakes, but God saw through the mistakes and realized that his heart was with God. Even though he really messed up with some of his kids, he didn't get it right in a lot of ways. So I think we could kind of maybe not be so hard on ourselves sometime when we mess up.
Yeah.
Because God's forgiving and he's merciful. And maybe he looks at me like I was a man with God's own heart. I hope.
Thank God for grace. Yeah. And by the way, we keep talking about David and the dysfunctional family there. Let's not forget Absalom was making his own choices. Okay, this was on Absalom to the much larger extent. Absalom was the one who decided to try to take over the throne. So good stuff. Hey, we ran a little bit late. Let me have a prayer and we'll be dismissed. Father, thank you again for being a God of grace. We look at these characters in Scripture that were real men, real women, and we think of them as larger than life, as heroes, as supernatural almost sometimes. But then when we get into their lives, we realize that they had issues too, and they struggled as well, and they needed you and your guidance and your grace, just like we do. And Father, as we continue this week, I pray for your guidance and your grace. I pray that you would create in us a clean heart. Thank you for allowing us to be here tonight. I pray that you'd be with everyone as they travel back home. Help us to be more like Jesus as the week continues. It's in his name that I pray. Amen.